Hey everyone, welcome to this week's CISO Talk. I have a very special episode coming up. In fact, it's almost nostalgic to me with who my next guest is. My next guest is someone who showed up on this podcast before it was called CISO Talk, when it was called the CyberHub Engage podcast. We did it in person. We did it in an office. We weren't even virtual. And it was, I think, guest number 6 or 7 on the program. Today, he comes back. He's in a newer, greater, upgraded role. He's an unbelievable base of knowledge for today's show, so you're going to want to stay tuned for it. But before I do that, please make sure to subscribe to our podcast right now. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, turn on the subscribe bell, tune in. The CyberHub podcast, which is our other show, has daily content. So if you have not subscribed to the CyberHub podcast, please make sure to do so right now. Daily content, our 10 to 15 minute practitioner brief, every single day, Monday through Thursday. We're live on Fridays at 11 a.m. on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, Twitch, and Reddit. You name it, you can catch us there. And now, without further ado, let's bring in my very, very special guest, nostalgic in nature. It's CISO Talk time, folks. Here we go.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're listening to the CISO Talk podcast. No sales, no bullshit, just straight talk. Straight talk. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
David Nolan, welcome to the show, buddy.
Glad to be here. Glad to be back. Seems like it's been forever.
It has been forever. David Nolan, the CISO over at Aaron's. Welcome back to the program. It's been one of those days, right? Like I'm clicking and I'm like, why isn't the music starting? And I'm clicking in the wrong button, right? It's been one of those days. So we'll just take that with a grain of salt. Welcome to the show, good sir.
Thank you.
You were on the show before I had a style. Before I had all, you just kind of came on, and first time I had you on, I think we talked about, getting started in cyber, kind of breaking into security, and you talked about your infamous spam filters on your email. And so we'll for people, we're not going to talk about those things today, folks. If you want to, I'll link the other episode right here below. Go check it out. Listen to it after this one. I guarantee you it's a gem. But David, for the audience who's tuning in for the first time, give them a little bit of background on how you got started in security, if you don't mind.
Oh man, it depends on how far you want to go back. I mean, I've been a nerd my whole life. Started all the way back in high school working in corporate IT. So, early career was always a developer. Loved creating things and building, that type of thing. Mainly worked for Fortune 100s, government, that type of deal. But like many young people, also like breaking things and taking stuff apart. So early on in my career at Caterpillar, really where I started to get involved in security, I was a developer, was interested in security and how you could break things. They were really looking to grow their application security program at the time in their organization. So I was asked and given the privilege of that challenge. And that really started the journey that I've had through security. And of course, now that I'm at Aaron's, I was really brought in to grow and modernize the information security program, and really excited at all the things we've been able to achieve and the team's been able to achieve. And it's kind of where we leave today.
Right, you really matured into your role, right? I mean, you were, the previous CISO, a good friend of ours, Elmir, right? You were his right-hand man. You guys were, thing 1 and thing 2 at every single event we ever went to, and now you've kind of blossomed and you've taken that role. Talk a little bit about that career progression, because I think a lot of people that listen to the show always wonder, what's it like to be groomed to become a CISO? What was that like for you? And actually going from, being a senior vice president to being the chief, being the head honcho, what was that like for you?
Yeah, and I don't think you ever think about it when you're in it. I mean, it's always just focusing on the goals at hand and trying to do the best you can, trying to grow your team and empower them and excite them for the vision. And, it's easier to look at it in the rearview mirror and say, oh yeah, that was a great journey. But while you're in it, you're, having fun. And honestly, I just have so much fun day to day, and it's great to be a part of it.
The tech team always at Aaron's, like for the local Atlanta crowd, you guys were always like the coolest kids in class, right? Whether it was you or John, who's no longer there, or Elmir, you guys were always like the coolest kids in class. So it's so great to see you, and it's so great to see your hard work pay off for you to get that role. Like, as someone who's been watching it from the side for the last 4 years, like, I got to tell you, man, it's very fulfilling to see your hard work pay off and to see good people succeed. And I think that's a good message to deliver as we start off the show. People say I'm a fanboy, but I think it's part of it is you want hard work to pay off, right? Because we tell people who want to break into security all the time, work hard, put your head down, get the work done. You'll get there. You did just that, and you led, and yeah, unbelievable, great work. So now that you're sitting in that CISO, your business card, those still exist? I don't know. Does business card still exist post-COVID? Has anyone gotten a business card in the last 18 months?
Yeah, I don't have
them. Talk a little bit about some of the skills you look for as you're now, building a team, and what are some of the intangibles that really stand out for you during the interview process?
Yeah, shameless plug for the first podcast that we did together, because we talked a lot about hiring for cybersecurity, and I think a lot of those tenets still stay the same, of just where to look for your talent and how to get creative and not look for your typical security engineer. So my goal when I hire is to look for the right person, not the right resume. What I mean by that is I don't focus on kind of that traditional security expert, right? I'm not looking for a specific amount of years using a specific amount of or specific tools, those types of things. I'm more looking for someone that shows that initiative that we talked about, that can keep their head down, that is creative and innovative. And really the initiative, I think, is probably the table stake, right? It's something I always look for, regardless of the role that I'm hiring for. Always looking for those people that are just hungry, wanting to find problems, solve problems, and build cool stuff, right? And ultimately, to meet that, I think, and this is something we talk about a lot at Aaron's, but really looking for builders at heart, looking for people that are willing to get their hands dirty to solve problems, and not just security, identify problems and pass it on to somebody else. That's not really the culture that we have. And I think the other thing is if I am finding people that are coming from industry security, many years of that, really looking for those with a willingness to work with the business to find that right balance in security, and potentially, if needed, the willingness to change, learn, and function as a risk advisor instead of the kind of old school way of doing security from when we all started.
It's interesting to see how that's evolved, but that kind of evolved you in leadership as well, right? What skills do you think it requires for you today to really do your job effectively and excel in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it starts with just passion to develop people first. Kind of be that servant leader, right? If you can build highly effective teams, highly engaged teams, it really gives you the ability to step back and not have to deal with the day-to-day and the details as much. So, especially now with the market being hot, retention being a challenge for a lot of companies, just pouring yourself into making your teams the best them that's possible is really the key to success in your overall program, I think. I think part of that and kind of the key skills, as you say, is that willingness to listen first. One of my favorite mentors, Jamie Engstrom, she's actually the CIO at Caterpillar now. She always talked about not necessarily being the smartest person in the room, but it's all about leading and asking the right questions to solicit the right feedback at the table. So being able to listen first and not just injecting your way of approaching a scenario. And really, as leaders, we need to be open to new and innovative ideas, technologies, to old challenges, right? We need to be willing to challenge ourselves and our teams, to challenge the status quo that we're all used to. Just because it's on a Magic Quadrant doesn't mean it's the right thing to solve your specific problem in your business. And it's one of those. I think we have a challenge in the more innovative leaders out there in our space are looking to solve problems, not necessarily to buy tools. My personal example, talking about not just bringing my ideas and forcing them on the teams is previously, background development, building application security programs. It was very easy for me when we started building one to say, this is how I did it and this is the right way, right? But it was one of those things. I took Jamie's advice, took a step back, listened, was the devil's advocate, if you will, and really gave the teams room to innovate and come up with their own ways, the best for the business. And really it led to a highly innovative, award-winning program that I could have never driven the team forcibly to if I was, kind of leading more aggressively. So I think that's really key, is just listening, giving the teams room to breathe and room to succeed, really.
Yeah, that's kind of taking that step back and really just, rather than, it used to be that a manager would tell you what to do, right? And the leader kind of leads you on what to do, right? So it's getting the people around the table. It's getting all of them to brainstorm. It's building that roadmap together, right? It's almost like you're a facilitator rather than the decision maker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I got asked a few weeks ago by a new employee, man, you sure ask a lot of questions. And it's like, yep, that's really the goal, right? Is to get you thinking about things you may not thought about and really making sure you're not kind of getting a scotoma and blocking out the obvious stuff that sometimes when we get deep into projects and solutions we miss. So,
CISO's the role of a CISO, CISO, whatever people want to call it. It's really becoming an enterprise type of role. And that's really bringing about a new set of skills that, are needed. What do you think those skills are right now?
Yeah, so it's great you brought that up, because I always mention that with security. We have our hands in a lot of things, and we're briefed on a lot of stuff, and it's not just technology type projects. So we're kind of a person that's in the know, knows the beat of the street, right? So we're definitely, at least if we want to be a successful security leader or just leader at a company, we're able to bridge a lot of different groups and bring people together. So I think just being an overall enterprise-wide leader really starts with being a trusted risk advisor. So not just being, the security person that says what you can and can't do, but really partnering with the business and various business leaders to talk about the risk of the decisions we're making, talk about the risk of the technologies we're bringing in, the vendors we're bringing in, all the different stuff that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. If you can really foster that, it leads to you being seen as less of a security person and more of a critical strategic thinker that helps them work through their decisions. And a problem solver. And what I found is that it's very broadly applicable in whatever role, whatever discussion you're in throughout the business, right? So really that key skill that leads into that is being able to talk in business terms. And we as security individuals, as security leaders, need to do it on a day-to-day basis. We're taking those risk discussions, those highly technical concepts, and our goal and our really target is to put them in very clear, very easily understandable business terms. And that's universally acceptable across the enterprise. And really, to me, the key skill that you're talking about or asking about to becoming that enterprise-wide leader.
Yeah, that's so true. Like everything you just said is so on point, David. It's what every CISO needs to focus on is don't go and get another security cert. Go take a business class somewhere, right? Belong to some business networking groups and not just security ones. Step outside of your comfort zone and your circle. Start to see what people really care about. And I think that's how you excel. Brilliantly said. I couldn't ask you to, you couldn't have said it any better. Let's talk a little bit about cyber, right? Because that's what we're here for. That's really what the show's all about. Where are you spending the most time on security and why?
Everywhere. that's my cop-out answer. But no, I think there's kind of two ways of doing that, and one we just talked about. But there's that whole strategic thinking piece of where we're spending our time, and then what are we actually doing like day to day, right? So, strategically, I'm thinking a lot about like validating the efficacy of our controls. And you look at just the news, and everybody's getting hit or popped in one way or another, whether it's public or not. So like, and everybody has some level of security maturity that is generally defensible, right? So it really comes down to, okay, everybody's got the traditional, compliance required based security, but what can we get better at? So I'm constantly thinking about like, does the stuff that we have in play work as we intend it to? And better yet, does the controls that we have, or the controls we may not yet have considered, exist due to new risks? So tons of new cyber attacks out there, tons of new ways, Solarwinds and all these other things that everybody always quotes, new ways of approaching these. And are we thinking about those? But how do we know if we're going to think about those, right? And how do we do that? So with, cyber criminals constantly evolving, we need to really obsess over not resting on our laurels. And, I've seen some folks do that where it's like, oh, we've got X, we're good. It's like, yeah, but X is not always as effective with these new attack ways. And more importantly, like things like attacks methods, like living off the land and things like that, can very often, use your own systems against you. So how would you detect that and how you think about that? So, I mean, there's no answer to any of that stuff, right? Because it's constantly evolving, but I'm always thinking of that strategically, as in that traditional security role. But I think the more practical answer is like, what am I actually doing on a day-to-day basis, right? When I'm thinking, and it goes back to that working with the business, right? So I think where I advise a lot of people and where people see, or other leaders see, buy and fail is working with the business, right? If you can't articulate risks to the business, if you can't make it visible, then they really don't care as much about security, right? Or at least they don't deeply care to be able to prioritize it, to invest in it, et cetera. So one of my big goals is to always be working with other leaders to make that risk visible, to being that trusted advisor I mentioned. And really, I think that's a key role of security these days, is to be that advisor, to provide the visibility, and really to make the business allow them to make more complete and more informed decisions as they go through their days as well.
So let's talk a little bit about that trusted. We got an echo. Check. Oh, we got an echo here somewhere, folks. Give me just a moment. We are now good. Check. There we go. We are good. All right. So let me ask you this, David. You talked about being the trusted advisor, and in the last two questions, we didn't really talk cyber. We've been talking about being kind of more part of the business and an integrated part of the business. Well, security is critical to all of that, right? Security is critical to that part of the business. But as you look at kind of the development of the role of the CISO, right, and kind of where the role is really going, the last 18 months have really transformed the role of the CISO, because it no longer came about availability. It became so much more about than just availability. It became about access to information, integrity. I can give you a whole slew of things. Right. When you look at the evolution over the last 18 months and where CISOs are spending more of their time now, do you think that shift is directly tied to the new kind of hybrid work reality? Or do you feel like the shift was about to happen and this probably boosted it?
I think it more boosted it, because I'm just going from personal experience. That was one thing I strive for early on when one of the reasons why I joined Aaron's is to kind of look at security differently, right? More from a lens of a business partner. The simple way I've reasoned that is, you can say that our job is to protect the company, and at the end of the day, it is, right? It's table stakes. But like, if you don't understand where data is being used, how it's being used, what projects are going on, how they affect the business, and all those elements, then you're not able to be as an effective of a protector of the company as possible. So that's why when I say trusted risk advisor, it's getting out there, it's making those relationships, and by nature, you get so much buy-in, so many people being as passionate as you. You can take a step step back from a lot of things. And honestly, the technology teams, a lot in my experience, are the ones who want to drive security just as much if they understand the mission. So I really think, back to your question, I think we've already been on the journey. It's just kind of poked its head up a little bit over time. And now that we're remote and everybody is having to, experience the same technical challenges and things like that, it's really brought us to the forefront of just how differently we have to run things.
Yeah, but in a good way, right? Like if you look at what we've done in the last 18 months, we've really, I don't want to say improved our security, but we've really matured our security, right? I mean, if you were a CISO who was vying for a spot, you got the spot, and if you didn't squander it, you're in a great position today. And I think that's really critical to kind of understand. As we kind of look at that, let's talk a little bit about, security projects. And there's a very interesting thing about, security projects we all work on. In the show, I always make it a point to never talk about what we do from a security perspective, because I know that just like I've got 10,000 great people listening, I've got 2,000 that aren't so great, that would love to get their hands on this little bit of information. So very generally, as we talk a little bit about, security projects you enjoyed working on and some of those things, what's kind of stands out for you as a security project?
I mean, I just have so much fun on this stuff. There's just so many of them. Of course, there's probably, 2 or 3 of them that really have highlighted in my career. And they all go back to ones that are just super innovative, and have allowed me and allowed the teams I work with and to help succeed, to be able to share those approaches with other companies. Like the highlight of my career, I can remember it a few years ago when I was at a conference, and all these, everybody knows the names in Atlanta, these big CISOs at Fortune 100 companies and stuff, who we all look to a lot of times. We were presenting on some projects that we had, call them award winning, if you will. And afterward, I had 2 Fortune 50 CISOs and 1 Fortune 100 come up to me afterwards and say, "Can our teams work together? This is exactly what we've been struggling with. We love the way you've done this, the innovation you've approached." And I'm just like beside myself, of saying like, that is success. That is success for the teams right there. And it's the proud papa moment of going to the teams and saying, everybody, look how well you've done, and look how great it is. So, but a lot of those are like heavy integration, heavy automation, some areas to be general, like AppSec, huge innovation things in AppSec, full privacy automation and cloud security, things like that. But it all really comes back to teams collaborating across all technology organizations, integrating those native, sometimes off-the-shelf technologies, and building new things that didn't exist. We're a very early adopter type company that is highly innovative, and that requires security to do the same, right? And so you don't always have the technologies exist. You don't always have the logos on the sheet from your VARs that you can get. So we've been forced to innovate, and those are the ones that are most fun, because you're in some cases doing things that no company's ever done, that a year or 2 later, like we're seeing it now. Some of the stuff we built a few years ago, some of the vendors are just now starting to market and create it as an actual software as service package, and that's just so cool to have gone down that path as they are, or before they are in a lot of cases. And it's just so satisfying and so much fun to be a part of that and help those teams succeed.
So that brings up a really excellent point, right? Which is the collaboration between different security teams in different organizations. And when you and I go and talk to our threat intel teams and we get an update, right? We go, "Hey, what are you guys monitoring? What do we need to be looking at? What are some of the developments we should be paying attention to? How do those developments impact potentially our roadmap, the vulnerabilities that exist, our patching timeline?" There's a lot of different questions that go on if you operate a good threat intel team. You talked about the recognition from other CISOs who come up to you, and we here in Atlanta, we roam in the same circles, and I can only imagine, the kind of, when you get that positive feedback from some of these guys who are, what we call alt-timers, but also kind of like, the godfathers of cyber here, it's very satisfying. But talk a little bit about those teams working together and kind of that culture, right? Of we need to work more together because our adversaries do the same exact thing, and we're so fragmented. It's, that fragmentation is really one of the things that kills us.
Yeah, I mean that's core to the culture. I think I'm thinking back to when I started. That was one of the first slides I had with the team was, partner, right? And we kept talking about partnering and stuff because as I'd seen it in the past, and I'm sure we all have, like, we don't want to be security, and we don't want to be off in the corner doing our thing and finding problems and not bringing solutions or not partnering with solutions. So I think it's critical. If you have to start with the culture, and I often speak on don't try to change your culture, try to change your approach. And security and you as a leader or even your teams need to really understand what is the culture of your company. Don't try to change it. It's a great thing of why your culture, but work within those bounds, work with those other teams to really get security adoption as part of that. So making those partnerships. I've joked with my team once, you don't have to be working on security stuff 100% of the time. We're helping the business, and that's building partnerships, to when we get a security thing and we could say, hey, I need your help on this. And a non-security person wants to help with security. It goes both ways, right? So building those partnerships, I've seen, makes it so much better for adoption for, even the classic like CIO versus CISO thing. Like we had a past history was talking to somebody externally, was like, we're talking about the great partnerships that we've had across these technology and security organizations, and keep the names out. Someone had said, like, well, tell me how the relationship really is between the CIO and security, because we all know they want to do other things besides do security. And I'm like, it's part of the conversation. Like, I'm just trying to like convince this individual that that's the reality of it. And to me, it's just so great to be a part of that. It's a two-way street, of course, but being able to partner with technology leaders, being able to have the discussions on what priority is and help them understand the impacts and work together with their problems, our problems, because it's really the company's challenges at the end of the day. I think that's just critical to the overall success. And I think it's table stakes more than anything for any CISO or security leader to be able to make their program successful.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up such a great point. It's interesting because over the last 18 months, our kind of private discussions that we used to do, at an event, we'd all scroll to one little corner, would hold our bourbons, or scotch or whiskey, whatever your beverage of choice is, as long as it's scotch, bourbon, or whiskey. If you're drinking anything else, go F yourself, right? But and you're having those backroom discussions around some of the stuff we're seeing, some of the challenges you're trying to overcome. The last 18 months have really made those challenging because we can't really do that on Zoom because we're all security people. We're all like questioning, like, what am I going to say on Zoom that's going to bite me in the tail? Right?
Sure.
And I think that's really important for a lot of people to understand is now that we're kind of going back to meeting, right? One of the things we learned over the last 18 months is to kind of build those small groups, but now we really need to expand it. We really need to go beyond it. And we really need to increase the information sharing. And a lot of times I hear CISOs talk about, well, if CISA or the FBI, and I'm like, we need to stop. Like, those people are great assets and they're great tools and they're great people to know. And you should know them and be friends with them. And you don't just want to know them on the dark day. You want to know them on all your sunny days as well, because they're invaluable resources. But at the same time, we as a group need to be better at our information sharing. We need to be more coordinated in our efforts when we're building and addressing different security challenges, because what I go through in my cloud security, you're probably going through the same thing. And I can probably my lessons can probably shorten your, the lessons I learned will shorten your lessons, will shorten your path to achieving what you're trying to achieve.
For sure. Yeah, I think the collaboration is key. And we all have the same enemy at the end of the day, right? Or at least we're protecting against the same type of actors. I think it's critical as well.
It is. It takes us into a completely different place. And that's one of the challenges that security practitioners have, right? If we look at it, in your opinion, what challenges have we overcome? What are some of the things that, I remember you and I getting together at RSA, I think, was it 3-4 years ago? We're sitting on the state of Georgia, had a boat. The Georgia Department of Economic Development, I think, had a boat, or the Atlanta Metro Chamber, I forgot who had the boat. Someone had a boat. We were sitting on the boat and we were having a conversation about some of the challenges, right? What are the challenges? What challenges have we overcome, let's say, since that conversation on the boat?
Yeah, there's probably two that kind of are the call it pitfalls that we've run into that I've seen a lot of folks in the industry get better at. I think the first one is not just saying no. The idea of being the old stiff security is compliance approach is getting a lot better. I still think there are some opportunity to grow there and kind of continue to evolve. The way I always tell my teams and others around me, like, companies are not in the business of security. So, like, even those that sell security products, I've learned in talking with them, are not in the business of security as far as being perfect at security, right? They got to balance, just like everybody else, the risks, concerns with the business to be able to be successful. So, well, I think we should target keeping the company safe. That's our primary goal, of course. We're not the ultimate clearinghouse, right, for non-standard approvals for everything. We're not the ones that say yes and no, or we shouldn't be. Really, our job, going back to what we said before, is really being those advisors, making it visible. More importantly, the right level of the organization, so we can make those decisions. So, yeah, I think people are getting better at just the individual security people being the yes no folks, but still room to grow. I think the other one, and I think this is really critical right now with everything going on in the news. I think there's still many practitioners today that are communicating kind of too much FUD, right? Too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt, especially with what's going on in the news. Historically, we've had the whole crying wolf risk in our space, but what we really need to be doing as part of everything that's going on and utilizing that is to think in terms of business, right? Not theoretical. So when I say not theoretical, not, hey, there's this vulnerability, but pixie dust and the moon aligning in retrograde must occur for the vulnerability to actually get exploited, right? Like, actually talk about it in terms of the business. What's the likelihood of what you see in the news? So if we're talking about SolarWinds, how could we react to that, or how did we react to that? Or you see a breach in the news and you're talking with your execs and your board. Here's how we would have reacted to that. Here's whether that would have impacted us. But putting it in their terms and communicating that realistic likelihood and impacts, I think is really important. You can also use this, everything going on, as a lot of education, because the cool thing is, with it being in the news, is everybody's getting visibility to it. So everybody at least is kind of on a similar page, and your board and stuff is seeing it as well. And it provides you an opportunity to have a conversation. But as stewards of that, we need to have a balance, right? We don't want to abuse that excitement and ask for $8 billion of a security budget and things we don't need and turn it into doom and gloom. We really want to use it as an opportunity to partner with those other business leaders and executives to understand their concerns, understand the biggest company risks, and then spring that into proposals to address those concerns, mitigate those. And that's a great opportunity to bring up, resources that are challenging, roadblocks that are in your way, prioritization challenges that you may have, all that stuff that we fight with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's those are two very well thought of kind of things that we're overcoming from a challenge perspective. I think that's really I don't want to say just spot on, but it's really great to see those really change. Let me ask you another one. What are some of the challenges we still need to master? What are some of the things that we're still almost grinding water on that really it's about time we get over?
I mean, it's all those pitfalls, right? The one big one that I always talk about is solve problems, don't buy tools, right? So and I think it's just the nature of the industry we're in, right? Is there's a lot of potential to spend and a lot of potential for people to sell things. So the one thing that I think we need to kind of think about first is when you're approaching a project or a problem, start with what problems are we trying to solve? What does success look like on the other side of this project, rather than saying, what are we going to get? What are we going to buy? How are we going to deploy it? Those type of things. And if you approach that, you may end up with a similar solution, but then again, you may find that the things that by the gut you want to buy or use don't exactly solve the problems that you truly are trying to solve. So at the end of the day, we're not doing the classic thing in security of all the tools that are trying to solve a problem that may not exist. We're just solving problems in our own companies. So,
that's look at it from a community perspective for just a moment, will you? Let's kind of talk about this in general. Some of our problems, I think, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, right? And maybe you'll see eye to eye with me, or maybe you don't, and that's okay either way. It's okay, because I think people agreeing all the time is also very boring, right? I think one of our biggest challenges in security until today is our cyber vocabulary. Not one term means one thing. Not one vulnerability has one name. Not one threat actor has one name. I saw this over the last 7-8 months, right? If we go back to SolarWinds and fast forward, someone from the board will call me. I'm reading something in the Wall Street Journal about so-and-so. And I'm like, what? And they go, so-and-so. And I'm like, well, hang on. And I Google it and I'm like, oh, you mean Solarwinds? He goes, well, in Wall Street Journal, they're calling it so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, wonderful. And then you look up the Wall Street Journal article and you go, who's the douche that came up with 700 names for something? Mm-hmm. I think that's one of our biggest challenges that I've suggested this, and I've got a solution to this problem. MITRE, which has the CVE database and has, all the threat actor database, they should also have a vocabulary database. The first one to discover the vulnerability and report it gets to give it a name, or they get together, they get you and I and a bunch of other really smart people in a room. We do this like they do hurricanes. We come up with 100 names for vulnerabilities. Those are the next 100 names. You come in, you get them, you get the name, and if we know it's a C, then we know, there's A's and B's before the C. Kind of like how you know where you are in hurricane season. If we're at, zebra, hurricane zebra, we're probably at the end of the season, right? More or less. Or it's a very active one. I really think we need to solve this. I think this is hindering so much of the work we do with the business, because security becomes, as more and more writers write about security, they tend to reference different sources. And because every source has a different name for something, there's a language barrier. And then we as security professionals, either I don't look informed as a CISO, right? And now I've got to, we call it this. Well, why do you call it this? Because that doesn't exist, I think, in any other part of the business but security.
Yeah. Well, I don't agree or don't disagree with you, James. Then you're taking away all these great security researchers' glory to be able to name something after a dog or a friend or something else. But that's definitely a challenge, because another side of that you see is they'll attach the company to the problem, or one of the companies that was impacted, and then it becomes known as the XXX breach. But maybe they were, the reality is the problem has nothing to, or it's not primarily dealing with that company. So I think the title thing is an issue. I think, still the kind of company shaming thing can be an issue. And just the way things are reported. I think what we mentioned before, everything being in the news, it's created a positive thing for us, because the conversations that we've always strived to have are happening, right? But then, with great visibility comes great education. When you get a CEO that's going to come and ask you, should I be concerned about TLS 1.1 and whether we have it enabled? And then you have to describe to them, what is that? Why should they care? But in terms that they can understand, and in business terms that we can have, it creates quite a challenge. And I totally get where you're coming from there.
I'm very frustrated by it, right? Because to me, it's it's one of those things where I almost wished, right, that we could, and there's an easy solution for it. Because when you want to report a CVE as any organization, you go there, you select it, you get a number. It doesn't matter, right? And I get that names are very special, and I love security researchers, and I appreciate some of the names they come up with. But then jump on a committee and give those names in there, right? Like get those names to be named, because what's happening is there's a disconnect, and that disconnect is impacting the professionality of the individuals who need to be trusted. Like we finally have the board's trust. We're finally getting executive leadership to listen to us a little bit more and take us seriously. They're finally interested in security, meaning when they see a security article on the Times website, they're not clicking, they're not going by it, they're reading it, they're forwarding it to us. They want to get our opinion. They want to get us to brief them. They want to understand what the risks are to the organization, or they want to understand, could this impact someone and somehow impact us indirectly? Those are all very positive conversations that we're having, conversations that we didn't have 3-4 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. It's a good bad, right? But you know what? Bring it on. I would much rather be having the conversations and having to do the education than not. So,
well, you want to have the right education in place. I'm not the one to think that for a second we can change the media from writing a horrible headline about something, right? My favorite one today was the NSO offices. The NSO group offices were raided by Israeli government. I'm like, no, they weren't. I spoke to NSO. They weren't raided at all. The Ministry of Defense came for a visit. There was no warrant, no arrests, no computers were taken, no equipment was. What's a raid? A raid is when I show up, full SWAT team breaking down your doors, sticking people in cuffs. Is that not what a raid makes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm venting. So with that said,
but you digress.
What?
But you digress.
I tend to digress sometimes on the show. I'm trying to get the show shorter. So we're at the end of the show here. It's time for a CISO Insight Round, folks, where we get to know a little bit more about David Nolan as a human being and not just a CISO. So my buzzword graveyard, give me a buzzword you want to get rid of forever, David.
Artificial intelligence. For sure. I just think it's turned into an inappropriate marketing term. Like, so it's applied to every security offering, regardless of what it is. And it's, some people are just doing complex logic. Maybe they're doing machine learning or deep learning, but they're using AI as a synonym for anything that's fancy, right? And it's just frustrating.
Well, break him down, David. Folks, go back and listen to his complex spam filter. Break it. When someone tells me AI, I break it down. I go, well, tell me, how was the AI program? What AI language are you guys using? And when they can't answer those questions, I go, so you're using machine learning. You're just hoping to tell me it's AI.
Yeah, for sure.
Next. All right. One technology that I think will forever change security.
Let's talk about the one that I'm excited about right now. And that's really like the control validation stuff that we talked about. I'm really excited about like the automated attack and validation technologies. I mean, we've all done these things manually with red team, blue teaming and all that, but like being able to just use, MITRE ATT&CK framework and being able to do that on a continuous basis to really test yourself. I'm pretty excited about that.
It's awesome. What's the book you're reading right now, or the last book you read if you're not reading anything?
I alternate fun and growth kind of thing. So personal growth, just finished the Stonewall Reader. So it's a book covering all the stories and struggles of the LGBTQ community back in the 60s and kind of around the Stonewall Uprising. Really eye-opening for me, and enjoyed it. The last fun one was finished about a week ago is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So that's a great space sci-fi fiction with real science, I'll add. It's the same author as The Martian. So if you like The Martian, it's just a fantastic nerd book that has problem solving, sarcasm, space fiction, all that fun. So we highly recommend it.
Love it, love it, love it. What's the last movie you saw?
In theaters?
Or on Netflix? What'd you Netflix last?
Oh man, in theaters was probably Monsters Inc. And Netflix been working on cars a lot, and I like to watch documentaries during while I'm doing that. So a lot like World War II things and whatnot. But Yeah.
I am a very much documentary person. You should watch Heist.
I have not seen that yet. I saw it. It's in my queue.
So Heist is very interesting. So it's modernized documentary. So it's taking real stories of real heist, and they're kind of modernizing it with some real footage and some actor footage. But it's if you're a security person, it does give you a little bit of a fuzzy, warm feeling.
Okay, great.
So, and it also kind of shows you, it gets you to think about security in a completely different point of view. It's very interesting because it's successful heists. So it's all about successful heists. So think of a data breach and you can watch a heist. And to me, I can translate different things. I won't ruin it for you, but you should watch it. Favorite music, David, what do you enjoy listening to?
Oh, I'm super eclectic, so I listen to everything and always trying to listen to anything unique. But I think if you look at my playlist, most of it's EDM, so dance music. Been listening to that since early 2000s, and really helps drive me and get me working. So
I enjoy EDM when I'm doing testing. Like if I'm studying for a cert, I got to have some EDM because I can't have anything with a lot of lyrics, right? Because then you start singing it, you're not really comprehending. But EDM is check out Israeli EDM. I got to send you a few playlists.
Sure,
it's really good stuff, man. Really good stuff. Awesome. And what's one thing you took away from SolarWinds?
I think it's just security has way more tendrils than what we thought, and just the deep advanced piece of that attack, and the fact that people like Microsoft didn't detect it. It took one of the leading IR firms to even find it in their environment. Really opened my eyes to just how complex these things can be, though it's led to a lot of great cross industry collaboration. The government's been reaching out to a lot of us to do things, for instance, with Biden's EO and some of the other legislation. It's actually, again, opened that conversation up much broader that we talked about. Just made me excited to see where we're going to go in the next few years. Yeah,
I will tell you that all the one thing I'm very happy with this new administration on is how seriously they've taken cyber. And Neuberger is an unbelievable asset to our community. To see her having an office in the White House with access to the president is something no other president had before, right? And it's something that just shows it. This morning on the practitioner brief, I actually advocated that we need a minister of cyber, a minister that actually his office orchestrates all of the activities of cybersecurity between Cyber Command, NSA, DOD, DHS, CISA, FBI, Secret Service, public-private, FS-ISAC, the MS-ISAC, all these different ISACs, so that you've got one office, and that person reports directly to the president, and not a cyber czar, because you give the minister of cyber also budgetary. That office allocates budgets and has a team. That might be the future of what our nation needs.
For sure.
So I love that. Folks, David Nolan is a legend.
Wouldn't say that.
I would. Every time I speak to you, I come out smarter, more sharp, and more grounded than I do coming into the conversation. And I think that speaks volumes about you as a human being.
I appreciate
and I'm grateful that when I was new into this industry, when I was just new in Atlanta, you were one of the first people to hug me and kind of welcome me in. And I'll always be forever grateful for that. And I never forget a good deed when one's done. And so I try to repay him as many times as I humanly can. Kind of like that episode of Office when, what's his name? Dwight brings everyone bagels. And then Andy's always got to one-up him. He's like, well, here you go, sir. And he's like, no, here you go, sir. Right? I'm like one of those. So constant like that, and I appreciate it. Folks, David Nolan, you can connect with David on LinkedIn. Please don't spam him. Please don't. He's got filters everywhere. And if you need to understand how to overcome his filters from 4 years ago, go check it out. About 3 years ago, one of our first episodes was with David. Talks about his email spam filters, which are just brilliant. I've actually employed that entire technique all the way down to the 7th layer. So you guys will definitely enjoy that. Until next week, we'll have another great episode here of CISO Talk. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. David, thank you for taking time to be with us today. I really appreciate it. Folks, have a great rest of your day wherever you're watching, whatever part of the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, be responsible, and most importantly, stay cyber safe. Cheers.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.